I'll hit record here. Glad you're all here, my friends. Let's see if I can get there it is.
Hadn't said hi to Craig yet. Hi, Craig.
Hey, I skated in hot. I had clients whining about stuff they don't need to be whining about, so I was late.
All right, so yeah, we talked about that story 2 weeks ago, the binding or sacrifice of Isaac, and then we saw the results, which was the death of Sarah, and then Abraham's long involved buying of the tomb in which to bury her, right? So it was yeah, we did not leave in a happy spot. And then we didn't really talk about it, but basically Isaac comes down the mountain separate from Abraham, and we don't see him again for the rest of that story. So he doesn't show up for his mom's burial. He doesn't show up for any of it. It's sort of a weird absence there. That changes today, so we'll just jump right in today and get to the happier story, which is the 24th chapter. Now, Abraham was old, advanced in days, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in everything. And Abraham said to his servant, the elder of his household, who ruled over all that was his, "Pray, put your hand under my thigh. I want you to swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the women of the Canaanites among whom I am settled. Rather, you are to go to my land and to my kindred, and take a wife for my son, for Yitzhak." The servant said to him, "Perhaps the woman will not be willing to go after me to this land. May I then bring your son back there, back to the land from which you once went out?" Abraham said to him, "Watch out that you do not ever bring my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from my kindred, who spoke to me, who swore to me, saying, 'I give this land to your seed,' he himself will send his messenger on before you, so that you take a wife for my son from there. Now, if the woman is not willing to go after you, you will be clear from this sworn oath of mine only. You are not to bring my son back there." The servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his lord, and swore to him an oath about this matter. All right, so we're going to start with the awkward part of the story. What the Bible speaks in lots of euphemisms. Today's story is a perfect example. The servant is asked to make an oath by reaching under Abraham's thigh. So what is under Abraham's thigh? No one? What's under any man's thigh? If I reach under your thigh, what am I going to hit? His testicles. The pledge is pledge on my testicles that you will do this. That's the oath. All right. He's asked to swear on his master's testicle, the source of life, the promise of God to be the father of many. You have to swear on my testicles that you're going to do this. It's an awkward oath, but that's the oath.
How'd you like to be Margaret Boone getting up and reading that at the AMBO?
She's probably fine because it is euphemistically, right? I mean, it says, "Put your hand under my thigh." Okay, that seems weird, but why not? But no, it's pretty clear. That's the whole idea of this, right? Now, here's the interesting. This may only interest me. Testicle or testes comes from the Latin word testis, which means to testify or to swear an oath. Right? Testis comes from tris in Latin, or three. So to testify comes from the Latin three, which means a witness testifies in a third person account, right? So you have these sort of overlapping terms of meaning. Testicle, testis, testes, testify, and then yes, testament comes through the same word from Latin testamentum, which means the last will. It's the last will of a person is their testament. And so yes, all of those, testify, testament, testicle, testes, all come from the same root words.
That's crazy. Oh.
Well,
here's the thing. I can say it's true in English, but I don't know if it's true in Hebrew. I didn't have a chance to call Ron. I was going to call Ron and ask him, like, okay, help me out with the Hebrew here because I don't know this one. But it is all related. And there are moments in some of the older texts and that men are asked to swear on their manhood to do that. So testament and testify and testicles do all end up getting overlapped in their meaning, and certainly the meaning here is the same in this. Swear, I want you to make an oath to me. Swear on my testicles that you're going to do this as I ask. The Bible's interesting, isn't it? Not the first thing you thought you were getting today, huh, Stefan?
No, but I have learned something new.
There's always something new to learn in the world, isn't there? But it is all right there.
Wow.
So what does
All right
Brueggemann do with all this?
Brueggemann skips it.
Ah,
Brueggemann skips it. I had to look at
What a
Friedland and a couple
chicken.
other guys, but Brueggemann skipped it. I was disappointed in him.
Yeah, smart man.
Yeah. So interestingly, Abraham wants his son to marry an Armenian, or Aramean rather, because it says later that Abraham was a wandering Aramean, but he wants to go back to find a wife there, not a Canaanite girl, but he does not want Isaac to go there, which is an interesting kind of turn. He understands this is reversing the promise of God to go to the promised land. He almost sees it as being unfaithful to that promise, right? Why would you go back to the land that you came from? The whole point is to be in the new land. But I guess it's not to have a new wife in the new land.
What's the prejudice against Canaanites?
I think the prejudice is a concern about them being pagans, right? Of being polytheists. They don't believe in the one God.
And Arameans do?
That's not altogether clear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Not altogether clear either way. Maybe. But it's a weird sort of instruction, right? I mean, just go home, go back to get people over there. So, the stranger thing is these are the last words and testament of Abraham. This is his last will. There is nothing he says for the rest of the book. They will go, they will get Rebecca. Sorry, I don't mean to ruin anything. But he goes, they find Rebecca. Isaac gets married, in the next sequence, and Abraham dies. So this is it. This is Abraham's his last testament is, please swear on my testicles that you will find find a daughter for my son, and you will continue the promise, right? That's it. His biggest concern is ensuring his son is married, and it's likely that heir will continue, right? He's worried about having the next generation. He doesn't get to see it, but that's his biggest concern. All right. Terence Freetham notes that Rebecca, rather than Isaac, parallels Abraham. She continues the faithful response of leaving home and family that furthers God's purpose. We'll see that in a minute, but they find Rebecca in Aramea, and she then follows Abraham and not Isaac. Isaac doesn't go anywhere. He's completely motionless, right? Rebecca's the one that follows Abraham's story, leaving her family for a promise in a new land, right?
Yeah.
According to God's will. So it's an interesting parallelism that it's not Isaac, that it's Rebecca, who also then Rebecca takes the main, she takes the stage. She's the one from this point on that really takes over the narrative. Isaac is passive and old and lost for most of the narrative. All right, thoughts on this first sequence. So the chapter is divided into 4 parts. This is part 1. Part 2 is the servant going to find Rebecca. Part 3 then is bringing her home. Or actually, part 3 is negotiating the dowry. Part 4 is she comes home. But any questions on this first part, on swearing oaths, on Abraham's desire to get an Aramean, any of it?
No. Well, he obviously had a lot of confidence in this particular servant to send him on this, what he considered a very important mission.
Yes.
The swearing part is kind of strange, but
Yeah, it is. Well, we can certainly say the hard part about all of this is we don't know what it was like 3,000 years ago or so. It's actually 3,500, I think, give or take, if we take it literally. That were about 3,500 years ago. What were the customs in those days? And
Mhm.
maybe that was the custom of how you swore an oath. It's hard. I don't know. Or how you found a wife, right? I mean, all of these things are, all we can do is read what's written and guess a little bit around the edges. All right, so the next section is pretty long, but we'll jump right in then. The servant took 10 camels from his lord's camels and went, all kinds of good things from his lord in his hand. And he arose and went to Aram of Two Rivers, or Aram Naharaim, to Nahor's town. Naharaim, excuse me. He said to have the camels kneel outside the town at the water well at setting time, at the time when the water drawers go out. And said, Lord God of my Lord Abraham, pray let it happen to me today for me, and deal faithfully with my Lord Abraham. Here I have stationed myself by the water springs as the women of the town go out to draw water. May it be that the maiden to whom I say, pray lower your pitcher that I may drink, and she says, drink, and I will also give your camels to drink, let her be the one that you have decided on for your servant, for Yitzhak. By means of her, may I know that you have dealt faithfully with my Lord. And the term is hesed. And it was not yet had he finished speaking when here Rebecca, came out. She had been born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, wife of Nahor, brother of Avraham, her pitcher on her shoulder. The maiden was exceedingly beautiful to look at, a virgin, and no man had known her. Going down to the spring, she filled her pitcher and came up again. The servant ran to meet her and said, pray, let me sip a little water from your pitcher. She said, drink, my lord. And in haste, she let down her pitcher on her arm and gave him a drink. When she had finished giving him to drink, she said, I will also draw for your camels until they have finished drinking. In haste, she emptied her pitcher into the drinking trough. Then she ran to the well again to draw and drew for all his camels. The man kept staring at her, waiting silently to find out whether the Lord had granted success to his journey or not. It was when the camels had finished drinking that the man took a gold nose ring, a half coin in weight, and 2 bracelets for her wrist, 10 gold pieces in weight, and said, whose daughter are you? Pray, tell me. And is there perhaps in your father's house a place for us to spend the night? She said to him, I am the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor. And she said to him, yes, there's straw, yes, plenty of fodder for us, and yes, a place to spend the night. In homage, the man bowed low before the Lord and said, blessed be the Lord, God of my Lord Abraham, who has not relinquished his faithfulness, his hesed, and his trustworthiness for my Lord. While as for me, the Lord has led me on the journey to the house of my Lord's brothers. All right, so what we can say first, we're now witnessing the dating rituals of the ancient world. We know this because it gets repeated in 10 chapters or so. When we see Jacob trying to find a wife, it's repeated again with Moses when he tries to find a wife. It's repeated 3 or 4 different times in the text, so we can find ways and know that it's pretty much how it works. The servant or the guy who's looking goes where the girls are. Shocking. Good start, right? The women are in charge of drawing well from the local watering hole. And yes, we still use the same terms, right? We go to the local watering hole. It's the same idea. We go where the ladies are. And if it's ladies' night, we go for the ladies, right? That's how it works. He asks for a drink. So step 1, you go to the well. Step 2, you ask for a drink. She gives him a drink and his camels a drink, or depending on which of the stories we're talking about, she gives him a drink and starts a conversation, right? They have conversation over drinks. Now, this is no small offer, we should say, for Rebecca. If you have to drop a bucket into the water, pull it up, carry it to a trough, and empty it, that's a lot of work, right, by itself. Does anybody know how much one camel can drink at one sitting? I had to Google it. A lot. Yeah. I see Stefan's mouthing a lot. That's true. Up to 20 gallons per camel. And there were 10
Oh.
camels, right? So that is 200 gallons of water that this poor girl pulled up from the well and poured into the trough. You're doing a lot of work. A lot of work just to welcome someone, which we can say speaks to her hospitality and her generosity, right? That she's willing to help someone she doesn't even know and engage on that level. It shows that Rebecca is a strong person and a good person, right? That's a lot of work. So we quickly learn that she's likely the girl. The servant, though, even though the servant got exactly what he asked for, he said, Lord, may I find a girl who gives me water and waters my camels? She does, but for some reason he wants more information, and it's really only when he finds out the family connection that he's suddenly okay, right? That is, she finds out that it is her, I guess, niece or great niece of her Lord, of Abraham, right? Going through that lineage. I think it's great niece. So it's a family connection, but not immediate family connection, enough that I guess you know their background, you know their people.
So she
Now,
would be Isaac's cousin?
on some level, but I think like a second cousin, because I think it's one generation removed in there.
Mhm.
But yeah, because I think it's the grandson. I mean, Rebecca, I believe, is the granddaughter, if I read it correctly, is the granddaughter of Abraham's brother, right? So
So
that
that would be
means
like
it's
removed. Yeah.
it's like once removed, I guess, or something like that. But yeah, cousin once removed. Anyway. But here's what we can say. Here's how the dating ritual works, right? You go to a well, you ask a girl for a drink, you chat, you go to meet her family, and then you close the deal with a meal, right? You have a negotiation with her family, and then you close the deal with a meal. That's clearly how people got married, at least according to what we have in the text. That's how Isaac ultimately gets married. That's how Jacob gets not one, but two wives. That's how Moses gets Zephyrah in Exodus, right? All of these follow the exact same pattern. Seems to be the pattern, and it seems to go pretty quickly. It may not have been that quickly in reality, but that's how the story's told. So we'll go with it, right? A quick note: Hesed is used a lot. It's one of the more common words in Hebrew, and it means loving kindness, or it's translated loving kindness. It's often referred to as the piety or love that we have for God. And it's also translated as loving kindness or loyalty from God. Like when God shows his hesed to humanity, it shows that he loves someone, he cares for someone, he has a loyalty to someone. So the finding of Rebecca is framed with the word at the beginning and at the end, right? The servant prays, show that you have this hesed, this love for your servant Abraham, God, by helping me find the right woman. Thank you, God, I found the right woman. Thank you for this hesed, for this loving kindness, right? He shows his steadfast, that love, that steadfast loyalty to Abraham by being involved in this. In a way that is very passive, we've had God literally say things to people and destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. God's been like directly active in previous chapters. Now God is sort of that half step removed where we have to interpret that the right things happen to show that God's involved. Right. So we're seeing a little bit of a shift in the narrative too, which to be honest is more what all of us deal with, right? Where we have to go, oh yeah, I knew God was involved, but we have to think back on it usually instead of knowing it all the time in the moment. It's not always as readily clear sometimes. All right, so with all that said, random note, I love that the gift the servant brings is a nose ring. I don't think that would go over too well nowadays. And a pretty big and heavy nose ring, right? Like it was a big chunk of gold, enough that they made a comment about it being whatever 4 weights of gold. I'm guessing that was a more common gift, maybe even something like earrings, or maybe it was like an engagement ring. I just find it funny, right? It's a sort of one of those like, huh, that's what the servant went with, right? A nose ring. Might have gone with the bracelets personally, but fair enough if that works. Maybe that was the custom. Questions or thoughts on this beginning of the engagement ritual with Rebecca?
Do we know if it's typical that a servant would do it on someone's behalf? I know we talked a few weeks ago about the fact that Isaac might have been disabled in some way.
I-
But
I have to think that it would not be. I mean, I would think that most of the time you would always, even just if you're the potential husband, you would want to go find your spouse
yourself. Mhm,
yourself.
mhm.
So whether it speaks to, there's two ways to interpret it. I would say one is it speaks to, again, maybe a disability with Isaac, that was, sort of one rabbi's thought. It would also speak to the disengagement or the deep divide between Abraham and Isaac after the sacrifice, right after the binding,
Mhm.
that they can't even talk to each other. And Abraham knows he needs a daughter, but can't even get his son to talk to him about getting a daughter. And so he has to do it for him.
Mm,
I mean, there's a whole lot of it would speak to one or both of those issues, I would think, right?
mhm.
That the servant goes instead of Isaac. But there might be other reasons. I mean, other thoughts? All right. Well, we'll keep going. So the next section is pretty long. This is a negotiation with the family. They're going to go back. The maiden, Rebecca, ran and told her mother's household according to these words. Now, Rivkah had a brother. His name was Laban. And Laban ran to the man outside to the spring. And it was as soon as he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and as soon as he heard Rivkah, his sister's words, saying, "Thus the man spoke to me," that he came out to the man there. He was still standing by the camels by the spring, and said, "Come, you are blessed by the Lord. Why are you standing outside? I myself cleared out the house and a place for the camels." The man came into the house and unbridled the camels. They gave straw and fodder to the camels and water for washing his feet and the feet of the men that were with him. Food was put before him to eat, but he said, "I will not eat until I have spoken my words." He said, Laban said, "Speak." The servant said, "I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has blessed my Lord exceedingly, so that he has become great. He has given him sheep and oxen, silver and gold, servants and maids, camels and donkeys. Sarah, my Lord's wife, bore my Lord a son after she had grown old, and he has given him all that is his. Now my Lord has made me swear, saying, 'You are not to take a wife for my son from the women of the Canaanites, in whose land I am settled. No, to my father's house you are to go, to my clan, and take a wife for my son.' I said to my Lord, 'Perhaps the woman will not go after me.' He said to me, 'The Lord, in whose presence I have walked, will send his messenger with you. He will grant success to your journey, so that you take a wife for my son from my clan and from my father's house. Only then will you be clear from my oath curse. When you come to my clan, if they do not give her to you, you will be clear from my oath.' Now I came to the well today and said, 'The Lord, God of my Lord Abraham, pray, if you wish to grant success to the journey on which I am going, here. I have stationed myself by the water spring. May it be that the girl who comes out to draw, to whom I say, pray, give me a little water from your pitcher to drink. And she says to me, you drink, and I will also draw for your camels. Let her be the woman whom the Lord has decided on for the son of my Lord.' And I, even before I had finished speaking in my heart, here, Rivkah came out, her pitcher on her shoulder. She went down to the spring and drew, and I said to her, pray, give me to drink. In haste, she let down her pitcher from herself and said, drink, and I will also give your camels to drink. I drank, and she also gave the camels to drink. Then I asked her, I said, whose daughter are you? And she said, the daughter of Bethuel, son of Nahor, whom Milcah bore to him. Put the ring on her nose and the bracelets on her wrists, and in homage I bowed low before the Lord and blessed the Lord, God of my Lord Abraham, who led me on the true journey to take the daughter of my Lord's brother for his son. So now, if you wish to deal faithfully and truly with my Lord, tell me, and if not, tell me that I may know to turn right or left." Lavan and Bethuel answered, and they said, the matter has come from the Lord. We cannot speak anything to you, evil or good. Here is Rivkah before you. Take her and go, that she may be a wife for the son of your Lord, as the Lord has spoken. It was when Abraham's servant heard their words that he bowed to the ground before the Lord. And the servant brought out objects of silver and objects of gold and garments and gave them to Rivkah. And he gave presents to her brother and to her mother. And they ate and drank, and he and the men that were with them, and he spent the night. When they arose at daybreak, he said, send me off to my lord. But her brother and her mother said, let the maiden stay with us a few days, perhaps 10. After that, she may go. He said to them, do not delay me, for the Lord has granted success to my journey. Send me off that I may go back to my Lord. And they said, let us call the maiden and ask for an answer from her own mouth. And they called Rivkah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. They sent off Rivkah, their sister, with her nurse, and Abraham's servant with his men. They gave Rivkah farewell blessing, and said to her, our sister, may you become thousandfold myriads. May your seed inherit the gate of those who hate him. And Rivkah and her maids arose, and they mounted the camels and went after the man. And the servant took Rivkah and went away. All right, so now we see the closing of that dating marriage ritual. Clearly, the meal is meant to close the deal because the servant will not eat until the marriage proposal is heard and agreed to, right? There's something about that meal. If he had eaten it before, then maybe they would not have been a deal, because he wanted to make sure it was in the right order. There is a clear sadness in the sudden taking away of Rivkah, from her mother and her brother. That's part of this. But a whole lot of it seems like the servant just, I got to go. I got to get home. We get the idea that maybe Abraham is on his deathbed, since the next sequence, I mean, they come home in the next chapter, Abraham dies. It's almost like I got to hurry because there's only so much time and I don't know how Abraham's doing. Or maybe there's another reason, but the departure is pretty immediate. It doesn't seem like too much to, say, well, I'll give you 2 days. We'll rest a couple days before we travel back. But he has no interest, right? It's an instant move. And then Laban, who is Rebekah's brother, shows up again in Jacob's story. But the interesting thing is he uses the name of God, right? He uses the name of God. And because they believe, it seems like they believe in the Lord, right? The same God of Abraham. They are deferential to that. If you don't remember, Laban's the one who in a few chapters will offer his daughters to his, I guess, ultimately his nephew, Jacob. Jacob will try to marry one daughter and he'll trick him and make him work extra long and do all kinds of extra things. Laban proves to be a pretty shrewd negotiator and not always the fairest of guys. So it's interesting to see him here getting his sister married off. So it's with that context then that Brueggemann says, on the one hand, it is surely important that Laban speaks the name of Abraham's God. But on the other hand, the narrative is tongue-in-cheek. Laban has just seen the rings, the bracelets, and the camels. He may not be a true believer, but he is no fool either.
Said, hey, these people are rich.
These people got some cash.
And
well, maybe it's a good deal.
I'm telling you, this also, I'm like, part of the deal was like putting the bracelet on her, but also the gold nose ring. They put the gold nose ring on Rebekah, didn't they?
Yeah.
So I'm like, ew, who wore that gold nose ring before they gave it to her? Oh, that's a minor thing. I know I guess it was just a custom, but
who knows? Maybe it was especially made for
maybe
her.
No one had worn it. Yeah, maybe it was a gift.
Yeah. Hi, baby. Let me romance you with a used nose ring.
Yeah.
Well, even further, Craig, I grew up on the farm and we used nose rings all the time, but on the bull so you could control them. Was she that uncontrollable?
Oh gosh.
Well, why do you think women wore nose rings? Same thing, so you can control them, right? There you go.
Absolutely.
I never paid much attention to that whole nose ring thing, and I guess I assumed it was for one of the camels.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
Now women are starting to wear nose rings again. Is this telling us something?
Oh, goodness, no.
I don't know.
How about that?
Bill, I guess what I find disturbing in all this is we
Yeah.
keep saying the Lord of Abraham. Isn't he everyone's Lord?
Oh, sure.
So I'm just wondering why it's only Abraham's God and not
Yeah,
the
that's a good
servant's God, not Isaac's God, not Sarah's God, it's just Abraham's God.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Beginning to disturb. Yeah, yeah.
Well, it'll change. I mean, by the time we get to Moses, it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? I mean, it becomes the God of
Yeah.
the patriarchs. But yeah, for now, it is just Abraham's God. I guess it's only Abraham that God has made the deal with, maybe. The covenant's only with Abraham so far, but it's a good question.
Okay, so it still bothers me if he's the God of us all. Never mind. I mean, it's just disturbing to me. Okay, it's like that.
Mhm. Oh, I get it.
Because when we get to this, we don't call it Jesus, God, right?
No, we don't call him Jesus as God for sure.
I
Yeah.
wonder if
Or Paul, the disciples, even. It's just
Yeah.
So at any rate,
I wonder if it could relate to the, backing up to the beginning of the chapter where you said, Bill, he might have been concerned about Isaac's wife being a Canaanite because they were pagans or they were polytheistic, or maybe it's just a distinction
It could
between
be.
one and
Yeah,
the
between
other.
those. Mhm. Well, I mean, we can say that lots of the deities were very tribal in nature, right? Like you had the god of the Canaanites, you had the god of the Hittites, you had the gods of they all had their own. And to a certain degree, the reason we hear the most about the Greek gods and the Roman gods and the Egyptian gods is because those were the powerful empires, right? Like they defeated the other gods, or because the empires defeated the others, their gods became the dominant gods, right? Well, they won, so I guess those are the stronger gods.
Mhm.
And so possession, I think in that case, to a certain degree, and there's lots of people who will talk about this, right? Even with, uh, I mean, in a lot of ways, Judaism is sort of this connection too, right? It's the tribe of there's a very specific tribe and a very specific group of people who have claim on this God because they're all children of Abraham, right? It's not until Christianity comes along that you can really choose to follow a faith instead of it being chosen by birth. Because you can be a Jew without going to a synagogue, right? I mean, there's a sort of genetic marker almost to it within Judaism. Like if your mom's a Jew, you're a Jew, whether you like it or not, right? I mean, that's just how it works. But it's not true for Christianity, and so it's a different model. So maybe some of that possession then, Stefan, might be more in that tribal sense of things, right? Like this is the God of this guy and his people, as much as anything else. Before we get a better understanding of Abraham's God being a God of all.
gotcha.
Maybe that's one argument. Any other thoughts on the engagement sequence here?
I like the fact, but he is no fool either. That's good. That's good.
Yeah. That's Laban. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a great. I love that. That's how he described Laban.
Yeah.
I had to include that quote for sure because that's definitely him. He's the one who's always looking for a deal, always looking for the angle. The other thing I do find interesting is, and this happens a lot in scripture, but it also happens a lot in life. The servant was only really told to go to find an Aramean wife, right? He was not, at no point did the servant, at least in what we have recorded, was the servant told to go find someone in your father's house, like in Abraham's household, right? But that's 100% what the servant claims. Like, oh, I was told I had to come to his family and find a good looking woman. No, that's not what he said. He said, go and find her among the Arameans. So I'm not sure if that just wasn't recorded in the original oath, which is a possibility, or equally likely, someone hears or understands something that wasn't always spoken, right? Sort of like in the Genesis narrative where Adam and Eve are said, don't eat of the fruit of the forbidden tree, it's forbidden. But then when they have the conversation with the snake, the serpent, the wife adds, or you will die, because you will die, right? There's a sort of implied, there's no point where God says this is the explicit punishment for eating the apple, but she just sort of creates, because she knows it's bad and she's not supposed to do it, she creates the punishment, or I will die, right? Which I think we do as human beings all the time. Someone says, don't do that. They go, oh, if I do that, they'll be really mad at me, or this terrible stuff will happen. And you're like, well, they didn't say that. They just said, don't do it, right? You see it all, at least I can say that for Mose and Abe. I can do all kinds of things and say, don't go in the backyard unless I go with you. And they're like, there's rattlesnakes down there. It's like, I never said there were rattlesnakes in the backyard. But they sort of create these, reasons that we all create, sort of backstories that aren't necessarily always there.
But it may also answer the question I posed earlier. Why not a Canaanite? Okay.
Yeah,
No, it needs to be from his family. That's why he sent him to Armenia. Okay.
Right.
I'm guessing. It just could be an
No.
answer to that question.
It does answer that question. It certainly answers that question.
Mhm.
And whether it was implied or explicit, maybe that it's probably what Abraham meant, because that is the common. I mean, the fact that Isaac and Rebekah repeat the exact same thing to get Jacob's wife shows that there's something about these family connections that you married within your tribe or within your community or people on some level seem to be important.
And in 2022, it is important for some.
It is. Yeah. There have been lots of people who've done
stay within your tribe. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's lots of sociologists that have been doing tests and conversations about will a Trump supporter marry a Biden supporter or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And those are our tribes now, right? For sure.
Yeah.
Will a Republican marry a Democrat? I don't know. That's pretty big. That's a lot to ask. I need to be in my tribe. I need my Republican wife or my Democratic wife. Thank you very much. Not the opposite. Or my favorite, what is his name? What was Mom? What was the name of the priest who ran Emmanuel Center?
Oh, Colenso Hubbard.
Yeah, Colenso Hubbard, who played for Bear Bryant, was a nose guard for Bear Bryant for years and years and years. He and I were talking one day, and he was talking about how it was a mixed marriage, and he's an African American man who did ministry in the inner city. I was talking about mixed marriage, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And I didn't really think much of it. And he was like, "Yeah, it was the husband loved Alabama and the wife loved Auburn." Right.
I remember when I met your wife, she asked me what was my persuasion. And I said, what do you mean? She said, are you for Alabama or Auburn?
Yeah.
We weren't really invested either way.
Yep. But it matters. There are all these weird divisions we have in the world, right? We want to find the right person who's on our side.
Yeah.
Well, Mark's a Catholic, so he and I have lots of lively conversations around here.
Yeah, I bet.
I bet, yeah.
I do need to break in and tell y'all that Claiborne Jones taught me there will be people I disagree with in heaven.
Amen to that. A whole lot of them, I'm pretty sure. The main thing I'm hoping, though, Betty, is that I can laugh with them about how wrong we both were.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that. I wish you hadn't brought that up.
That's funny.
All right, so
Thinker, Bill.
What's that?
I said that's a thinker.
Yeah. Oh, I'm pretty sure. Look, the thing for me always is, it was the famous line from Thomas Aquinas, who's considered one of the greatest thinkers in the history of the church. one of the few people who actually has the title Doctor of the Church. There's only 3 of them in the history of the Roman Catholic Church. And when he wasn't quite on his deathbed, but he was older and had a moment where he had an ecstatic vision and he was close to death or just saw heaven and saw God. And he'd written all of the books, the Summa Theologica, as it's called, right? The theology of everything is the title of his book. And he said, all of my work is straw. It is worth nothing. I didn't get close. I did not get close to what the love of God and what heaven is like. Right? And if someone as brilliant as he is can say, I didn't really get it, I'm pretty sure I'm right there with it. That I'll get some stuff right here and there, but a whole lot of the time I'm gonna be laughing with somebody else going, well, you thought this and I thought that, and we both of us were so far off, it's comedic, right? Did the best I could with what I had, but whoops, did not get that one.
Yeah.
Did not get that one. All right, so this is just the final few verses. Now Yitzhak had come from where you come to the well of the living one who sees me, for he had settled in the Negev. And this is the interesting thing about that Shotgun translation. The Shotgun translation of the Bible always translates the titles of places. Let me see real quick. I can find the verse real quick. If we were reading it in NRSV, they would say Isaac had come from Ber Laha Roy, which means nothing to us. But translating the Hebrew, it means from the well of the living one who sees me. Just interesting how that translation, how this particular translation works. But for he had settled in the Negev, and Yitzhak went out to stroll in the field around the turning of the sunset. And he lifted up his eyes and saw, here, camels coming. And Rivkah lifted up her eyes and saw Yitzhak. And she got down from the camel and said to the servant, who is the man over there that is walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, this is my Lord. And she took a veil and covered herself. Now the servant recounted to Yitzhak all the things that he had done, and Yitzhak brought her into the tent of Sarah, his mother. He took Rivkah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus was Yitzhak comforted after his mother.
Whoa.
Yeah.
His mother, his mother dead?
Yeah, his mother died in the last chapter. Remember, he came down, they came down from the mountain.
Oh,
and the next thing.
In the tent of Sarah's mother. Okay, I'm sorry. There we go. I understand. Okay.
Yeah, but Sarah has died. Sarah died, and they buried her. But yeah. So
just the way that I had to reread it. I'm fine.
Okay. So I ran out. I didn't have time to actually put down my notes in the thing. But so for this one, within the PowerPoint, this one reads like a Hollywood script, quite frankly, right? Like they saw each other across the field at sunset, and oh, there's my husband. Oh, there's my wife, and she put on a veil and came to him, and oh, they were in love, and they happily lived happily ever after, right? I mean, it's a pretty grand conclusion to this story of getting a wife for Isaac, right? And again, the thing to note, the servant does not take Rivkah to Abraham for his approval. He goes straight to Isaac. And so you do get this sort of triangulation situation of whatever happened on Mount Moriah, whatever happened during that sacrifice, Abraham knew he probably wasn't welcome with Yitzhak. It certainly seems, right? To do all this work for your son and then not be involved in it any more than that is a weird thing, which the only thing you can do is reading between the lines, obviously, is say that obviously fractured their relationship completely. And in an interesting way that this whole story then, because of that last line, thus was Yitzhak comforted after his mother, after her death. You almost get the idea that this whole chapter, this whole story is Yitzhak sort of came down the mountain and was with his mom, and she died, and he didn't have anyone else in the world, and he needed someone, and so Rebecca became that someone, right? It's almost the way the story seems to be told, that it's this very heartbreaking, I mean, it's certainly hooray, Yitzhak got married, but more it's like, well, but she was also his comfort, right? At a very difficult time. It's a fascinating turn of phrase.
But Abraham, knowing, okay, how Yitzhak felt, got him that wife. Okay, that was kind of his. They might not have been speaking, but he did what he could to comfort his son. Okay?
Yes. Yes.
Now
Absolutely.
Yitzhak might not have realized that, but that's what looks to me now here at the end that Abraham was doing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's got a whole different feel. And it's fascinating. There's times when a story completely changes because of one line, and that is truly where the whole story changes because of one line, right? Like if you take out thus was he comforted after his mother out,
Mhm.
and it just ends with he took Rivka and became her wife and he loved her, well, then it's just a love story, right? But then you add that last line and suddenly it's it's a love story, but it's also something else at the same time, right? I mean, it becomes a sort of gift from the father, from the last gift that Abraham can give to his son. It's the comfort in a difficult time. It's all kinds of these other things, right? It's a fascinating one line that just changes the whole meaning of what's going on. To be sure. So yeah, there you go, Stefan. We got you out of the off the mountain and out of the tomb.
I feel a lot better this week, Bill. Thank you very, very much. Okay, you cannot know the weight that has been lifted from me. I appreciate
Good.
that immensely. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad we can get you out of there.
Yeah.
Stefan,
been
how
a
are you
million
feeling?
years.
Yes.
Pardon me. Okay. I mean, I'm going to therapy now, Craig. Okay, I'm sore, but I'm doing everything yeah. I mean, I'm kind of back to normal with my life, if that makes any sense. Okay, because
That's
I
good.
hurt prior to the operation.
That's
I
good.
hurt prior to the operation, so I have. It's just pain. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. Well,
Hmm.
glad you're getting around okay, and glad you're dealing with
Yeah.
it.
Is it less pain than before the surgery at least?
No.
Oh.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Well, I hate that you went through all that and didn't get a benefit.
Well, I did get some benefit. Okay, it's not the pain in my legs has been reduced substantially.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
That's good. That's a good thing.
Not my back, but it has legs. So okay. So there was some good out of it, and I'm still going to physical therapy. So hopefully it'll continue to get better.
Yeah. Well, if physical therapy isn't making you sore, you're not doing it right.
You got it.
So,
You got it.
I always call my physical therapist a physical terrorist.
Yeah.
Sometimes you felt that way.
I will say, Stephen, my sister had the same surgery you had, and took about 6, 8 weeks before she felt like she got any relief, and now she's running all over the place, so she's doing great.
Well, good.
Really helped.
Well, sounds good, my friends. We'll be on next week. We'll look at Abraham. It's actually the death of Abraham, and then we'll shift into the whole narrative of Jacob and Esau and all the fun stuff. So, all good things ahead. All right, my friends. See you. Good. Have a great week.
all right.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
See you guys.
See you Sunday. Take care.